Marcus wiped the grease from his hands with a torn cloth, squinting at the massive engine before him. The draconian starship's power core hummed with a sound that made his teeth ache. 3 years he'd been working in the mechanical bays of the Imperial fleet, and he still couldn't get used to their technology. Everything was too big, too complicated, and designed for claws instead of fingers. "Human!" The voice boomed across the hangar, deep and rumbling like distant thunder. Marcus didn't need to turn around to know who it was. High Commander Vextar had that particular tone that made everyone in the bay stop what they were doing. Marcus slowly turned, keeping his expression neutral. The Draconian stood 12 feet tall, his scaled hide gleaming purple-black under the harsh lights. Golden eyes the size of dinner plates fixed on Marcus with barely concealed disgust. Like most of his kind, Vextar had never accepted humans as anything more than useful pets. "Yes, Commander?" Marcus kept his voice steady, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "You will attend the ceremony tonight." Vextar's lip curled, revealing teeth that could bite through steel. "His Imperial Majesty wishes to see the human mechanic." The other workers in the bay went silent. Draconians didn't speak to humans unless they had to, and being summoned before Emperor Zixmoth was either a great honor or a death sentence. Given Vexitar's expression, Marcus suspected it wasn't an honor. "Is there a problem with my work, sir?" Marcus asked. Vexitar's laugh was like grinding metal. "Oh no, little mammal. Your work is adequate. The Emperor simply wishes to see what all the fuss is about." Marcus felt his stomach drop. For the past month, word had been spreading through the fleet about the human who could fix anything. Ships that had been declared beyond repair were running again after Marcus worked on them. Engines that Draconian engineers couldn't solve became simple puzzles under his touch. He'd hoped to keep a low profile, but apparently that ship had sailed. "I'll be ready, sir." Marcus nodded. "See that you are. And human?" Vexitar leaned down, bringing his massive head close to Marcus. The smell of sulfur and old metal filled Marcus's nose. "Do not embarrass us. The Emperor does not suffer fools." After the commander left, Marcus's friend Kira approached. She was one of the few Draconians who treated him like an equal instead of a pet. Her scales were a lighter green, marking her as lower nobility, but her engineering skills were sharp as any blade. "Marcus, you need to be careful tonight," she said, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. "There are rumors about why the Emperor wants to see you." "What kind of rumors?" Kira's golden eyes darkened. "Some of the High Lords think you're too skilled for a human. They're saying you must have stolen Draconian secrets or been modified somehow. They want the Emperor to order an investigation." Marcus felt cold despite the heat from the engines around them. An investigation would mean torture, dissection, maybe both. The Draconians were convinced that their technology was beyond any other species' understanding. The idea that a human could not only understand it but improve upon it was impossible in their minds. "What do you think I should do?" Marcus asked. "Be yourself," Kira said. "Show them that human intelligence isn't something to be underestimated, but be ready for anything." That evening, Marcus stood in the grand throne room of the flagship Eternal Dominion. The chamber was vast enough to hold a small city, its walls covered in gold and precious metals from 1,000 conquered worlds. Crystals the size of buildings provided light, casting everything in an eerie blue glow. Emperor Zixmoth sat on a throne carved from a single massive diamond. Even seated, he towered over everyone else in the room. His scales were pure black with veins of gold running through them, and his eyes glowed like stars. Ancient beyond measure, he was said to have conquered half the galaxy personally. "Approach, human." The Emperor's voice was surprisingly quiet, but it carried across the enormous room with perfect clarity. Marcus walked forward, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Hundreds of draconian nobles lined the walls, their eyes tracking his movement like predators watching prey. He stopped at the base of the throne and dropped to one knee as protocol demanded. "Rise!" The Emperor studied Marcus for a long moment. "So you are the famous human mechanic. Tell me, small one, what makes you think you understand our technology better than those who created it?" Marcus stood carefully. This was the moment that would determine if he lived or died. "Your Majesty, I don't claim to understand your technology better than its creators. But sometimes an outside perspective can see solutions that familiarity might miss." A murmur ran through the crowd of nobles. Some sounded amused, others offended. "Interesting." The Emperor leaned forward slightly. "High Lord Drexnall, step forward." A massive draconian moved from the crowd. His scales were deep red marked with black, and his eyes burned with hatred as he looked at Marcus. This was clearly one of the nobles who thought humans were getting too uppity. "High Lord Drexnall has brought to my attention that several ships have been improved after your maintenance," the Emperor continued. "He believes this is impossible without stolen knowledge or forbidden modifications to your person." "Your Majesty," Drexnall's voice was like grinding stone, "no lesser species should be able to comprehend our engineering. It is an affront to suggest otherwise." The Emperor's eyes glittered with what might have been amusement. "Indeed, it would be quite extraordinary if it were true." He paused, seeming to consider something. "Tell me, human, do you know the story of the Zephyrian War?" Marcus searched his memory. "The Zephyrians were a race of master engineers, Your Majesty. They created machines so advanced they thought themselves gods. When they refused to submit to your empire, you conquered them in a single day." "Correct. And do you know how?" Marcus hesitated. This felt like a trap, but he couldn't see the edges of it yet. "According to the histories, you used their own machines against them, but the details were classified." The Emperor actually smiled, showing teeth like ivory daggers. "The details, yes. The Zephyrians created machines that could not be defeated by conventional weapons. But they made one crucial error. They assumed that only they truly understood their creations." The throne room was absolutely silent now. Even the nobles had stopped their subtle movements to listen. "I took a single prisoner from their homeworld before the attack," the Emperor continued. "Not a soldier or scientist or engineer, a simple maintenance worker, a being who cleaned and repaired their machines without truly understanding the theory behind them. And do you know what I discovered?" Marcus felt his mouth go dry. "No, Your Majesty." This simple worker knew things the greatest Zephyrian minds had forgotten: how to make their engines run smoother, how to bypass safety protocols they didn't even know existed, how to turn their magnificent war machines into paperweights with a few careful adjustments. The Emperor's smile widened. "Sometimes, human, those who work with their hands know more than those who work with their minds." Drexnall shifted uncomfortably. "Your Majesty, surely you don't mean to suggest—" "I mean to suggest nothing." The Emperor's voice carried a note of warning that made Drexnall fall silent immediately. "I am stating a fact. Practical knowledge often surpasses theoretical understanding." He turned his attention back to Marcus. "Which brings us to your case, little mechanic. Drexnall believes you are either a thief or an abomination. I believe you might be something far more interesting." Marcus waited, not trusting himself to speak. "High Lord Drexnall, you have been complaining for months about the problems with your personal flagship, the Iron Talon. My engineers have declared it unfixable. The power core keeps destabilizing and no one can determine why." The Emperor's eyes gleamed. "I hereby assign this human to solve your problem." Drexnall's face went through several shades of red and purple. "Your Majesty, I hardly think—" If he fails, we will investigate him as thoroughly as you wish, the Emperor continued, ignoring the protest. If he succeeds, however, you will admit that perhaps we have been too hasty in dismissing human capabilities. And if he sabotages my ship? Drexnall snarled. The Emperor's laugh was like distant volcano. Then you will have learned a valuable lesson about underestimating your enemies, won't you? He looked down at Marcus again. You have 3 days, human. Fix Lord Drexnall's unfixable ship, and I will consider it proof that human ingenuity has value to my empire. Marcus felt the weight of hundreds of stares pressing down on him. 3 days to fix a problem that draconian master engineers couldn't solve. 3 days to prove that humans deserved something more than slavery and contempt. I understand, Your Majesty, he said. I won't disappoint you. Oh, I'm quite certain you won't. The Emperor's smile was impossible to read, because disappointment would be terminal. As Marcus left the throne room, he caught Kira's eye in the crowd. She gave him the slightest nod, but her expression was worried. Behind him, he could hear Drexnall already making plans, probably involving what would happen to Marcus's body parts after he failed. 3 days. Marcus had 3 days to do the impossible, and he was starting to suspect that the Emperor's little test was more complicated than it appeared. Nothing about this felt like coincidence. The timing, the specific choice of Drexnall's ship, even the way the Emperor had told the story of the Zephyrian War. It almost felt like the Emperor wanted Marcus to succeed. But that was impossible, wasn't it? As Marcus made his way back to his quarters, his mind was already working on the problem. A destabilizing power core that no one could fix. In a draconian ship, that meant the fusion containment field was failing, but the failsafes should prevent any real damage. Unless someone had modified the failsafes, or unless the core itself was designed for something other than what it was being used for. Marcus smiled grimly. 3 days to save his life and maybe change the fate of every human in the Empire. He'd worked with worse deadlines. The Iron Talon was a monster of a ship, nearly 2 miles long and bristling with enough weapons to level a planet. Marcus stood in its cavernous engine bay, staring at the power core that was supposed to be unfixable. After 6 hours of examination, he was beginning to understand why the draconian engineers had given up. The fusion core wasn't just unstable, it was actively fighting every attempt to regulate it. The containment field flickered between frequencies like a strobe light, and the energy output readings made no sense whatsoever. It was as if someone had taken a perfectly good reactor and deliberately broken it in the most complicated way possible. Fascinating, isn't it? Marcus spun around to find High Lord Drexnall watching him from the entrance to the engine bay. The massive draconian's red scales gleamed in the reactor light, and his expression was somewhere between amusement and anticipation. It's certainly challenging, my lord, Marcus replied carefully. Drexnall stepped closer, his claws clicking against the metal deck plates. My engineers spent months trying to solve this problem. Master Engineer Thisakar himself declared it impossible. And yet, here you are, a simple human, thinking you can succeed where they failed. Marcus turned back to his instruments, trying to ignore the implicit threat in Drexnall's voice. Sometimes fresh eyes help, my lord. Indeed. Drexnall's voice was silky now, dangerous. Tell me, human, what do you see when you look at my reactor? Marcus studied the readings again, his mind racing. There was something wrong here beyond just the technical problems. The damage patterns didn't make sense. A reactor didn't just develop multiple simultaneous failures in completely unrelated systems, unless... I see sabotage, Marcus said quietly. Drexnall went very still. Excuse me? Marcus pointed at the display showing the core's magnetic containment system. These failures aren't random. Someone modified the field generators to create a resonance cascade. They also adjusted the fuel mixture ratios and corrupted the safety protocols. This wasn't an accident or normal wear. Someone deliberately broke this reactor. And who would you suspect of such treachery? Drexnall's voice was deadly calm. Marcus met the High Lord's burning gaze directly. Someone who wanted to create an unsolvable problem. Someone who needed this ship to be out of commission for a specific reason. For a long moment, the only sound in the bay was the unstable humming of the reactor. Then Drexnall began to laugh, a sound like boulders tumbling down a mountain. "Clever little mammal," he said. "Yes, you're quite right. I sabotaged my own ship." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Why? "Because I knew this moment would come eventually. The Emperor has been watching you for months despite what you might think. Your little repairs and improvements haven't gone unnoticed at the highest levels." Drexnall circled Marcus like a predator. "His Majesty has been planning this test from the beginning." "I don't understand." "Don't you? Think, human. The Emperor tells you a story about using an alien maintenance worker to defeat an entire civilization. Then he gives you exactly 3 days to solve an impossible problem. Does that sound like coincidence to you?" Marcus's mind raced. "You're saying this is all planned?" "I'm saying His Majesty values practical intelligence over theoretical knowledge, just as he said. The question is whether you're intelligent enough to realize what he's really offering you." Drexnall moved to one of the secondary control panels and input a long code sequence. Suddenly, the reactor's readings shifted dramatically. Half the error conditions cleared instantly, revealing the true scope of the sabotage. "I've just removed the first layer of my modifications," Drexnall explained. "But there are 7 more, each more subtle than the last. The Emperor wants to see how far human ingenuity can truly go when pushed to its limits." Marcus stared at the new readings. Even with the first layer removed, the reactor was still completely unstable. But now he could see patterns that had been hidden before. "Why are you helping me?" "Because unlike many of my peers, I understand that the Empire grows stronger by incorporating useful skills, regardless of their origin." Drexnall's expression became serious. "The Emperor didn't choose me for this test randomly, human. I am one of the few High Lords who believes that humans might have something to offer beyond manual labor. And if I fail, then you die, I lose a significant amount of prestige, and the Empire continues to waste human potential." Drexnall shrugged. A massive gesture that would have been comical in other circumstances. "But I don't think you'll fail." Over the next several hours, Marcus worked with an intensity he'd never experienced before. With each layer of sabotage he unraveled, the next became visible but more complex. It was like solving a puzzle designed by someone who understood both the technology and the human mind. Kira arrived during the second day, bringing food and tools that Marcus hadn't thought to request. "How is it going?" she asked, looking at the dozens of diagnostic displays Marcus had set up around the reactor. "It's incredible," Marcus said, not looking up from his work. "Whoever designed this sabotage understands engineering principles I've never even heard of. But they also understand how a mechanic thinks, how someone with practical experience would approach each problem." "That doesn't sound like Drexnall," Kira observed. Marcus paused in his work. She was right. The sabotage was too sophisticated, too precisely tailored to challenge him specifically. "Kira, who designed the original fusion cores for Draconian ships?" "The Imperial Engineering Corps, but the fundamental theories came from—" She stopped, her eyes widening. "They came from His Majesty himself. From before his coronation, when he was still Prince Zixmoth the Scholar. The Emperor is an engineer? Was. One of the greatest minds in Draconian history. The fusion cores, the gravity drives, the quantum communication arrays. He designed them all." Kira looked at the reactor with new understanding. "Marcus, I don't think Drexnall created this sabotage." I think you're right. Marcus turned back to his work with renewed purpose. The Emperor himself had created this test. But why? By the end of the second day, Marcus had cleared 6 of the 8 layers of sabotage. Each solution had required him to understand not just the immediate problem, but the deeper principles behind draconian technology. It was as if someone was deliberately educating him, using the urgency of the situation to force rapid learning. The 7th layer was different. Instead of hidden modifications, it was a completely new component integrated so seamlessly into the reactor that it looked like original equipment. But Marcus could tell it didn't belong. The quantum resonance patterns were all wrong for a standard fusion core. "It's a cognitive enhancement matrix," Kira breathed when Marcus showed her the scans. "These were theoretical when I was in school. No one thought they actually worked." Marcus studied the component carefully. It was beautiful in its complexity, a crystalline structure that seemed to bend space around itself. "What's it supposed to do?" "Enhance neural processing speed and capacity." The theory was that brief exposure to specific quantum fields could temporarily increase intelligence and problem-solving ability. She looked at Marcus with concern. But it was never tested. The risks were considered too high. Marcus felt pieces clicking together in his mind. The Emperor's story about the Zephyrian worker, the impossibly complex sabotage that seemed designed to teach rather than stump. The precise timing that had brought him to this moment. "He's not testing me," Marcus realized. "He's preparing me." For what? Marcus looked at the enhancement matrix, understanding finally dawning. The Emperor mentioned that the Zephyrian worker helped him defeat an entire civilization. What if this isn't about proving human worth? What if it's about creating something new? The implications were staggering. If the Emperor could enhance human intelligence while maintaining human intuition and creativity, he would have the perfect combination of theoretical knowledge and practical application. A being capable of understanding the deepest principles of technology while retaining the outsider's perspective that could see solutions hidden from conventional thinking. "Marcus," Kira said urgently, "you need to decide if you trust the Emperor's intentions. Because if you activate that matrix, there's no going back. It will change you permanently." Marcus looked at the component, then at the reactor that was still unstable despite all his work. The final layer of sabotage was beyond anything he could solve with his current knowledge. But with the enhancement, "He's gambling everything on this working," Marcus said. "His own reputation, maybe the stability of the Empire. Why would he take such a risk on a human?" "Maybe because humans are the only species that isn't afraid to take impossible risks," Kira suggested. Marcus made his decision. He began the activation sequence for the cognitive enhancement matrix. As the quantum fields built around him, Marcus felt his mind expanding in ways he couldn't have imagined. Suddenly, the reactor's problems weren't just technical challenges, they were beautiful mathematical puzzles with elegant solutions. The final layer of sabotage revealed itself not as an obstacle, but as a gift, a problem so perfectly crafted that solving it would teach him principles that no amount of study could provide. But with the enhanced understanding came a terrifying realization. This wasn't just about him, and it wasn't just about proving human worth. The Emperor was preparing for something much larger, something that would require the impossible combination of draconian knowledge and human intuition. And Marcus was beginning to understand what that something might be. The cognitive enhancement matrix activated with a sound like singing crystal, and Marcus felt reality reshape itself around him. The reactor's quantum signature became as clear as text on a page. Every energy flow, every magnetic field line, every probability cascade was suddenly visible in his mind as interconnected patterns of stunning complexity and beauty. But it wasn't just technical knowledge flooding through him. He could see the Emperor's intentions laid out like a vast strategic map. This test wasn't random. It was the culmination of a plan years in the making, and Marcus was the key to something far greater than he had imagined. "Marcus!" Kira's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you all right?" "I'm—" Marcus paused, marveling at how differently his thoughts were flowing. "I'm better than all right. I can see everything now." The final layer of sabotage was elegant in its complexity. The Emperor had created a paradox within the reactor's core, where fixing one problem would create two others, and solving those would recreate the original issue. It was mathematically impossible to solve through conventional means. But Marcus no longer thought conventionally. Instead of fighting the paradox, he embraced it. He rewrote the reactor's base operating parameters to function within the impossible conditions, turning the sabotage itself into a feature rather than a bug. The reactor didn't need to operate normally. It needed to operate better than normal. Working with speed and precision that amazed even himself, Marcus began implementing modifications that shouldn't have been possible. He was essentially rebuilding the fusion core's fundamental architecture while it was running, like performing surgery on a beating heart while teaching it to fly. "This is incredible," Kira whispered, watching the energy readings climb steadily into ranges that exceeded normal operational parameters by 300%. "Marcus, you're not just fixing the reactor. You're making it better than it ever was." "That's the point," Marcus realized. "The Emperor didn't want me to solve a problem. He wanted me to evolve one." As the final modifications completed, the Iron Talon's reactor stabilized with a harmony that made the ship's hull sing. The energy output was so clean and efficient that subsidiary systems Marcus hadn't even been working on began optimizing themselves automatically. Drexnall appeared at that moment, his expression unreadable. "Impressive work, human. But you should know that your real test is about to begin." "What do you mean?" Before Drexnall could answer, the ship's communication array crackled to life. Emperor Zixmoth's image appeared in the air above them, larger than life and somehow more imposing than even his physical presence. "Well done, Marcus of Terra," the Emperor said. "You have succeeded beyond my most optimistic projections, but I'm afraid your victory celebration must wait. We have visitors." The main display shifted to show external sensors. 3 massive ships were approaching the Imperial fleet, but these weren't draconian vessels. They were sleek, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around themselves, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "The Zephyrians," Kira breathed. "But they were extinct." "You destroyed them all." "I destroyed their civilization," the Emperor corrected. "But their greatest minds had already uploaded themselves into quantum storage matrices, waiting for the perfect moment to return. That moment, it seems, is now." Marcus felt his enhanced mind processing the implications at lightning speed. "You knew they would come back." "I knew it was possible. The Zephyrians were too intelligent to be completely destroyed by conventional means. They would wait, learn, adapt, and return when they believed they could win." The Emperor's expression was grim. "My analysts calculated a 73% probability that they would return within the next decade. And you needed someone who could match their engineering capabilities," Marcus continued, understanding flooding through him. "Someone with human intuition enhanced by draconian knowledge." "Precisely. The Zephyrians' weakness has always been their inability to think outside their perfect logical frameworks. They create flawless solutions to defined problems, but they cannot adapt when the fundamental parameters change." The Emperor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You, however, specialize in changing the fundamental parameters." The Zephyrian ships were broadcasting now, their message cascading across all frequencies simultaneously. "People of the Draconian Empire, we have returned to reclaim what was stolen from us. Surrender immediately, and your deaths will be swift." Your Imperial Majesty, Drexnell said, with respect, even with Marcus's improvements to my ship, we cannot match 3 Zephyrian command vessels. Their technology is still centuries beyond ours. Under normal circumstances, you would be correct, the Emperor agreed. But these are not normal circumstances. Marcus, I have a proposition for you. Marcus felt anticipation building in his chest. I'm listening, Your Majesty. The cognitive enhancement matrix you activated was just the beginning. I have prepared 7 more, each designed to unlock different aspects of human neural potential while maintaining your essential creativity. The Emperor paused. However, using them all will change you permanently. You will no longer be entirely human. What will I become? Something new, something that combines the best aspects of multiple species while retaining the unique perspectives that make humanity valuable. The Emperor's eyes gleamed. You would become the first of a new kind of being, one capable of thinking in ways that no single species evolution could achieve. Kira grabbed Marcus's arm. Marcus, you don't have to do this. There has to be another way. Marcus looked at the tactical display showing the approaching Zephyrian fleet. Their ships were already charging weapons that could destroy planets. In less than an hour, they would be in range to begin their assault on the Imperial fleet. Millions of lives hung in the balance. What exactly are you asking me to do? Marcus asked. Win a war that cannot be won through conventional means, the Emperor replied. The Zephyrians have spent centuries perfecting their technology and tactics. They know how to counter every weapon in our arsenal, how to defeat every strategy we might employ. But they have never faced an opponent who could fundamentally rewrite the rules of engagement in real time. Marcus felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Accept the Emperor's offer, and he would become something unprecedented, something that might not even be recognizably human anymore. Refuse, and watch as the Zephyrians began their systematic destruction of everything he'd come to care about. If I do this, Marcus said slowly, what happens to other humans in the Empire? They become citizens, not property, the Emperor said without hesitation. Full citizenship, with all rights and protections. Your species will be recognized as equal partners in the Empire, not subject races. Marcus looked at Kira, seeing hope and fear warring in her golden eyes. He thought about every human still laboring in the mechanical bays, still treated as clever animals instead of people. He thought about the children who would grow up in a universe where humanity had a real future instead of just servitude. I accept, Marcus said. The next hour passed in a blur of preparation and transformation. Each cognitive enhancement matrix built upon the last, expanding Marcus's consciousness in directions he hadn't known existed. He could feel his perception of reality shifting, becoming more flexible, more capable of seeing patterns that spanned multiple dimensions of thought. When the process was complete, Marcus stood in the command center of the Iron Talon, feeling the ship's systems as extensions of his own consciousness. The enhanced reactor he had created was just the beginning. Now he could feel every system on every ship in the Imperial fleet, understanding their capabilities and limitations with perfect clarity. The Zephyrians are entering weapons range, Drexnell reported. They're targeting our command ships first. Marcus smiled, and for the first time since his transformation, he felt genuinely human. Then let's give them something they've never seen before. Instead of engaging the Zephyrian ships directly, Marcus began modifying the Imperial fleet in real time. He rewrote their shield frequencies to resonate with Zephyrian weapon patterns, turning their attacks into power sources. He linked the navigation systems of all Imperial ships into a single quantum network, allowing the entire fleet to move like one massive organism. But his masterstroke was more subtle. Using principles he derived from watching the Zephyrians' own perfect coordination, Marcus introduced tiny random elements into every Imperial system. Nothing that would impair function, but small variations that would make Imperial behavior genuinely unpredictable. The battle that followed was like nothing in recorded history. The Zephyrians, with their perfect tactics and superior technology, found themselves fighting an opponent that refused to follow any logical pattern. Imperial ships that should have been destroyed absorbed enemy fire and converted it to weapons energy. Fleet formations that should have collapsed into chaos instead flowed like living things, always one step ahead of Zephyrian targeting systems. "Impossible!" came the broadcast from the Zephyrian flagship. "Your technology cannot perform these functions. Our calculations show." Marcus opened a communication channel, his voice carrying across space with perfect clarity. "Your calculations are based on the assumption that technology must follow logical principles. But logic is just one way of understanding the universe. Human intuition follows different rules entirely." The tide of battle turned decisively when Marcus began implementing modifications that violated basic principles of physics, or rather, that used principles the Zephyrians had never considered. Suddenly, Imperial ships were moving faster than light without using hyperdrives. Weapons were firing around corners through folded space, and shield systems were protecting ships that were nowhere near them. Within 3 hours, the Zephyrian fleet was in full retreat, their perfect minds unable to adapt to an opponent who changed the fundamental nature of reality on a whim. As the enemy ships disappeared into hyperspace, Emperor Zixmoth materialized in the command center via hologram, his expression mixing triumph with something that might have been wonder. "You have exceeded my wildest expectations, Marcus of Terra. Or should I say, Marcus the First, architect of impossibilities." Marcus felt the truth of his new nature settling around him like a comfortable coat. He was no longer entirely human, but he hadn't lost his humanity. Instead, he had become something that could bridge the gap between species, understanding both the cold logic of advanced civilizations and the warm intuition of humanity. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, "I believe your joke has indeed become a blessing. But not just for me." "Explain." "You created the first hybrid consciousness in the galaxy's history. But the real blessing is what this means for the future." Marcus gestured to the tactical display showing the retreating Zephyrian ships. "They'll be back, and they'll adapt to what they learned today. But by then, there will be others like me. Humans enhanced by alien knowledge, aliens inspired by human creativity. The Empire won't just be a confederation of subject species anymore." The Emperor's smile was genuine this time. "You're proposing an evolution of the Empire itself." "I'm proposing that your joke about human potential becoming a blessing was more accurate than you realized. Today proved that the combination of human intuition and alien knowledge can achieve the impossible. Imagine what happens when that becomes the foundation of an entire civilization." Emperor Zixmoth was quiet for a long moment, considering the implications. Then he began to laugh, the sound carrying genuine joy for the first time in centuries. "Very well, Marcus the First. Let us see how many impossibilities we can achieve together." As the Imperial fleet regrouped and began planning for a future where the impossible had become routine, Marcus stood at the observation deck of the Iron Talon, watching the stars wheel overhead. He thought about the mechanic he had been 3 days ago, working in obscurity and hoping to avoid notice. That man was gone, but in his place stood something new and wonderful. A bridge between species, a proof that cooperation could create capabilities no single race could achieve alone, and the first step toward a future where human creativity and alien knowledge could reshape the galaxy itself. The Emperor's joke had indeed become a blessing. But the real blessing wasn't Marcus's transformation. It was the future it promised for everyone.